Hey, this is MJ, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to make our children's granny dress. This pattern is worked from the side across to the center in 2 pieces. So you get these nice vertical stripes down the front of the dress. The yarn that I've used for this pattern is Mary Maxim Prism. It's a DK weight number 3. It's 100% acrylic. And the color that I've used for the dress is Sunset. You'll need 2 hook sizes for the pattern, a 4mm as well as a 4.5mm crochet hook. The crochet pattern also includes modifications to make the dress into a sweater if you prefer, and the video tutorial will also show you how to add the ribbed cuff to the bottom. So I'm going to work through the sleeve with you for the pattern, and this is going to work for either our children's dress pullover pattern or the cardigan. They're both going to begin the same way. So we're going to start out with the little cuff. Now follow along with the size you're working on for how many rows you're going to need for your cuff. For the toddler size we're working on, we're going to need 24 rows. So we're going to start with the 4mm crochet hook. I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook, and for this size I will begin with a chain of 9. Then we'll single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in each chain across. So work single crochets . Now this pattern is worked from the side across, so we're working from the cuff across the pattern. So it's a good idea when you start out to make sure you're looking at 2 balls of yarn that can start in a similar way. That way, if you can see here, you're going to go with similar color patterns for each sleeve. Now this is just if you really want the sleeves to match. If you don't care, then don't worry about that. But if you want the sleeves to match as much as possible, just start working with from balls for each sleeve that start the same. So now once you've worked across, you're going to have 8 stitches, chain 1 and turn. And now we're going to work through the back loop only of the stitch. Work a single crochet in the back loop and a single crochet in the back loop of each stitch across. So I've chained 1 and turn, and we're just going to repeat row 2 now, working single crochets through the back loops only until you have a total of 24 rows for this size. Again, follow along with your pattern. The steps are going to be the same. The stitch counts will just be different depending on the size you're working on. So once you have your 24 rows, look sort of like should squish in nice and pull out, and you can see we have these little ridges going across. So that accounts for 2 rows. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. This one just got pulled back a little bit. Okay, so 24 rows. So now we'll work single crochets across the length of the band. So work 1. So you're basically working 1 stitch per row. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see this row here just has that little loop, 5, and then the next row has sort of a thicker section, 6, and then we're back to the little loop, and just keep working that across, 1 stitch per row. So I've worked across 24. I've switched over to the 4.5 millimeter hook. We're going to start with a chain 3, and that's going to count as our first double crochet. So we're going to skip that first stitch because this chain counts as our double. And then I'm going to work doubles in every stitch across. So 24 doubles in total worked across. So I'm going to start out with a chain 3, and I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3 doubles. I'm going to work a cluster chain 1, between the stitches. So I'm going to skip the next 3, 1, 2, 3, and work a cluster, which is 3 double crochet, chain 1. Okay, so you're going to do that all the way across, skip 3 doubles, work a cluster, which is 3 double crochet, chain 1. Okay, and I'll meet you up at the end. Chain 1, and then in the last chain right here, which was counting as our double, we're going to do our final double. Now I'm going to chain 3, turn, and we'll be working a cluster chain 1 in the chain 1 spaces across. Now I only need to do 2 double crochet here because our chain 3 counts as a double, chain 1, and a cluster chain 1 across. Okay, and in our last space at the end here, we're going to do 3 double crochet. And chain 3. This row now is an increase row. And to do the increase, we need to place our first cluster between these doubles, so between the first and the second double. So we're going to add 2 doubles because our chain 3 counts as a double, chain 1, cluster, chain 1 in each chain 1 space across, and I'll meet you up at the end to show you the next step. Okay, so our last cluster is going to go between that second and third double crochet of that final cluster. So now we started out here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with 2 double crochet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now the next row will be another row that starts with our chain. So it will actually have 8 and 2 doubles. And what we want to do is increase until we have a total of 10 clusters, but we'll be alternating between the 10 and 9 and 2 doubles. So we're not increasing too much for this size, but make sure to follow along with your pattern. This row now will chain 3. We skip over the cluster and do our first cluster chain 1 in that first chain 1 space. So cluster chain 1 across. And we end with a double crochet between the second and third DC of that last cluster, chain 3, turn, and now we need to work our cluster chain 1 in each chain 1 space across. So our beginning cluster, we do 2 double crochet, chain 1, and then work our regular cluster, chain 1 across. And we're ending with our cluster in the last space. Chain 3 and turn, and we're back to an increase row. So to do our increase, we're just repeating what I've already shown you. So there's a 3-row repeat here for the increasing. We're going between the first and the second double crochet. So work 2 doubles, chain 1, and a cluster chain 1 in each chain 1 space across. Okay, so we're ending with the last cluster between the second and third double crochet of the last cluster. Okay, and now if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've increased all we need for this size. So now I'll chain 3, turn, and in our first chain 1 space, we'll work a cluster chain 1. And we'll work that across. And we'll be ending with a double crochet between the second and third double crochet of the last cluster. So now this row will have 9 clusters and 2 doubles. We'll chain 3, and we're going to go back up to 10 clusters on this row, and then we'll just be alternating these 2 rows to get the length we need for the sleeve. So our 2 doubles to make our beginning cluster, chain 1, and cluster chain 1 across. So you're going to keep working now, alternating the last 2 rows until you have a total of 16 rows for this size. Okay, so I've been working on the little sleeve, and let's count how many rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 rows. And I've turned back to the right side, and now what we're going to do is chain out for the body of the dress. So I'm going to chain out 57, 1 extra for my turning chain. Okay, so I've chained out 57. Now we also need a chain at this side. So you can either work across and see what color you're going to be. And that's just a little tip. If you want to make sure the color matches up, we could almost be into the orange by the time we get here. And I just like when we do the chain that it is in the matching color. It just blends in a little bit better. So we can either go ahead and add our chain of 56 here now, or let's start working across the row and see if we're to the orange or if we're still with the brown. I think we'll probably be getting into the orange and we'll want to join on a piece with orange, but I'm going to go ahead and just keep going and see where we're at. So the reason that we do 57 on this side is we need the 1 extra for the turning chain, but this side will only add on and chain out 56. But let's just go across to see what color we're going to come to. So I'm going to skip the first chain. I'm going to work a double crochet into the next. So work your double crochet, work a double crochet in the next chain, the next chain, and then we'll chain one. We're going to skip the next chain and work a double crochet in the next 3. And this is going to be our repeat. So double crochet in the next 3. Chain 1, skip a stitch, and we're going, or skip a chain, and we're going to do that all the way across. So once I get to the sleeve section, I'm going to meet you up again. Okay, so you should be coming to that last 3 doubles. There should be 1 chain remaining. We're going to chain 1, we're going to skip, and then we're jumping right into the sleeve section, working cluster chain 1 in each chain 1 space across. So our cluster, which is 3 double crochet, chain 1, and work across. Now let's just take a look. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 clusters. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 clusters for the sleeve. This time we should have 10 because we're getting the 1 extra because we're working the start and the end. So I'm going to go across. We're going to see, it looks like I could be just ending the brown into the orange, but let's see when we get across. And then I'm going to find some scrap yarn to add on that chain. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, and of course you could do this ahead of time, and if you don't care about the difference in color, just go ahead and add on any bits that you have. Just grab a different ball of yarn. I'm going to go into the brownie orange color because I know that's what we're working with across. You're going to put a slip knot on your hook. I usually have this step first in the pattern. So we're going to do this. I'm going to slip stitch that in, and I'm going to chain out 56, and then I'm going to fasten off, and that's my multiple of 4. Again, we just did the extra on this side for the turning chain. So once you get 56 chains, you can fasten that off. And now we're just set up to continue working across. So I added my last cluster in that last space. So we had 10 clusters across the sleeve, 14 clusters across the front or back. It doesn't matter. It's whether this is the front or this is the back, it's the same. So we're going to chain 1. You're going to skip that first chain and work a double crochet in the next 3. Okay, so this will be our repeat. We're going to chain 1, skip a chain, work a double crochet in the next 3. So you'll end with your 3 double crochets at the end here. Okay, so I'm going to work that across. Okay, so I've worked all the way across, and you can see that blended nice by adding that orangey brown chain. So I have 14 across this section now as well. So 14 and 14 is 28, plus 10 is 38 clusters. So now we're going to get back into our pattern, just working back and forth in rows. So I'm going to chain 3. And I'm going to work a cluster chain 1 in the chain 1 space. And in the next chain 1 space, a cluster chain 1. So I'm going to work a cluster chain 1 in each chain 1 space across. Okay, so I've worked across now 37 clusters, and then we're doing our double crochet between that second double crochet and the first one. So 37 clusters and 2 DC for this row. We'll chain 3, turn, and we're going to work now starting with our cluster. So we're going to alternate between the last row and this row until you get the length that you need for the size you're working on. So cluster chain 1 in each chain 1 space across. And this row will end with that cluster. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end and we're going to add our last cluster. So this row now has 38 clusters. The last row has 37, so we'll chain 3 and we're going to continue going back and forth in rows. Now for this size, you're going to work a total of 10 rows. Okay, so you're going to get 2 sides made, 2 sleeves, 2 sides. Work up your 10 rows, and then it's going to look like this. So once you have your 10 rows, it's going to measure about 4.5 inches. We're then going to mark off our neck opening. So you're going to count. You should be ending on that double crochet row, not the row that starts with the cluster. So we're going to count our spaces, counting this as 1 space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and we're going to mark it. I'm going to do the same thing. I've already worked across this row, but you're going to do the same thing. Mark it at 17. If you follow it down from your sleeve, it's 1, 2, 3 spaces in, and you can carry that up. 1, 2, 3 spaces. Carry that up. So we have this marked. So this, if you fold it like this, you're going to see we'll have this opening, and then we're going to have some rows made to have this neck opening for the dress. So what we're going to do is you're going to start off your row as normal with your chain 3 and cluster. You're going to work across to your marked stitch. You're going to do a cluster right in that marked stitch as well. And then we're going to work only 3 rows. So I'm going to chain 3, turn, work back just in, again, the same pattern we've been working for our cluster rows. Okay, so cluster, chain 1 across. Cluster, chain 1 across. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work that across here. Okay, so I've worked across 16 clusters, chain 1 and a double crochet between the second and third DC. Okay, so now we have 1 more row to do, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3. we'll work a cluster, 2 double crochet, chain 1, and then 3 doubles, which is our cluster, and chain 1 across. So this row will have 17. So I'm gonna work that all the way across and I'll meet you at the top. Okay, so I've ended with my cluster. And now what I'm going to do is chain 1 and turn and work single crochets across. So we're going to single crochet in every stitch and chain 1 space. So 1 per double crochet and 1 per the chain 1 spaces. Now you may want to use the smaller hook for this. If I'm going to do a few and see how it looks. I just want to make sure that the stitches are looking even with the side of the dress. I think it's looking okay. You could use your smaller hook on this section. Let me pull it back and see. A couple stitches won't matter. We just don't want it looking like it's, we want it blending in nice. We don't want the stitches to pull too much, but we don't want it looking kind of too loose along this side either. So let's just go ahead, use the smaller hook for this part. And I'm going to work that all the way across. Now, as you come to the end, you want to make sure that you get 3 stitches for that last cluster. So 1 in the turning chain, and I'm going to fasten off. Okay, so now what we want to do is come back to this side. Okay, so we worked from here across. So we were working this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the 11th row we were working this way. So we want to make sure we continue working that way when we work this side as well. I'm not worrying about color matching at this point. I'm just going to use the yarn that I have to join back to my 4.5. Put a slip knot on the hook. We're going to join into the marked stitch, the slip stitch. I'm going to chain 3. And then work 2 double crochet for our first cluster. Chain 1, work a cluster chain 1 in every chain 1 space across. Okay, so this now is going to be worked identical. We're going to do 3 rows and we're going to finish the 4th row in single crochet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters here in between, and 1, 2, 3, 4 chain 1 spaces. Okay, so you end with a cluster. You're going to chain 3 and work back. Cluster, chain 1 in each chain 1 space. Okay, so I'm going to continue with that. And with a double between the second and third, chain 3, turn, work our last row, and then work that row of single crochet, and make sure to change to your smaller hook when you do the single crochet row. Okay, so I have already slip stitched the one side together, and this is a nice flat slip stitch seam. I really love the look. You can do your own preferred seaming method, but I'm going to show you how to do it this way. If you want that little pop of color, you can choose the color that you want. I'm just going to go with the orange because that's where I'm at with this ball. And I'm going to work with my smaller hook. Put a slip knot on your hook for this. You're going to go to the edge go through the back loop or the loops that are closest to the center, and we're going to pull through, making a slip stitch. The first couple are always a little bit of a pain till we get going. Want to make sure your yarn is going up between. Try to pull this up a bit so you can see. So we're going through the back loop or the loop that is to the opening, back loop on this side, which is to the opening, and we're going to pull through. It seems awkward at the start, but it does get easier as you work. You usually keep it flat down here, and then I just go through the back loop on this side, back loop on this side, unless you want to look at it being the front loop, but basically it's the loops on each side of the stitches that are going to the opening. And then you're just slip stitching, pulling right through. Make sure not to go too tight. See, as you get going, it gets a lot easier. So you're just going to do this all the way. Of course, you want to do seam together your front and your back. Okay, so once you get to the top, I'm going to get you to chain 1, and that's just going to secure things. And then you can fasten off. Okay, so you're gonna have your bottom tail and your top tail to weave in. This is how nice it looks. Should be a nice, smooth slip stitch join. Okay, so it gives you that nice detail. So you're gonna do that for the front and the back. And then what we're going to work on next is seaming the sides together. Now you can block your piece out at this point. It's a nice flat piece, and we have the opening for the head right here. And then once you complete your blocking, if you do any blocking, we're going to use the mattress stitch to seam the sides, and this is just going to eliminate being able to see the yarn color that you use to seam this up. So whenever you don't want the yarn to show, the mattress stitch is the best way to go about doing this. So you're gonna want a nice long tail. I like to go to 2 to 3 times the length of what I want to seam. Now, you may want to do a different piece starting with the purple for the sleeve, because you will, if you want to make sure that you don't notice any of that here, you could go with the purple in that section. So first off, just to get started, I'm going to get my yarn attached down to the bottom corner. And join it over here to this corner. Want to make sure everything is ready and in place, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to work this seam. So this is the right side. So if you take a look, we have our nice edge here, our nice edge here. So right side's facing out. Get this attached. And you want to make sure that your clusters are lined up as you work. You're going to take your yarn needle, you're going to slide it along the side, sort of through the clusters, just hiding the yarn. You're going to pull it through. You're going to go over to the other side and do the same thing. Just weave it through those clusters, hiding the yarn. And then pull it through. I've done a long tail, so it's going to be a little bit tedious. We're going to go up to the next cluster and just weave it through. Now you can do as little or as much. I'm going through a big chunk just to speed up the process. And then as you pull, it will pull it down and just hide any of that yarn. Go back to this side, go through this cluster. And see, as you pull it, it will just pull in the yarn so you don't even see it. Just make sure you don't go too far before you pull the yarn. Now it's going to look like it's slightly offsetting the clusters. That's okay. You could always come through here and go through bit of this space. Okay, and just keep working that all the way. Now when you get to the sleeve, it's going to look a little different because you're working across the side of the cluster, but you're still going to go one row at a time, hide your yarn through here, then hide it through here, hiding it through there, and you're just working it the same way. Just try and keep your yarn as hidden as much through those stitches as you work. Okay, and then you're not going to see any of the orange, which is nice. So you want it to blend nicely on the sides. Seamed, so it's all seamed together. Now what you want to do is select your preferred side for your front and back. Because they both are the same, you can take a look at both sides, decide which you prefer, and then we're going to finish the edge around the neck. I'm going to join into the back, and I'm going to join down into this corner. So I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. With a slip stitch, I'm going to join into the back corner. I'm going to chain one, and then I'm going to do a yarn over slip stitch around. Now I'm going to go through, each row is going to get 2 stitches. So yarn over, go through this row, pull through, yarn over, go back, pull through, and then when we get to the side of the cluster, I'm going to do the same thing. Once you're working into the stitches, it's a little bit easier, but when you're working across the rows like this, we're just going to make sure we're doing 2 per row. Now, messed up a little bit there. We need to try to stick a stitch in for that center seam as well. So we're just going to keep working this, doing a yarn over slip stitch, whoops, and once I get to the next stitches, I'll meet you up there. So as you work across the stitches, it is going to be a little bit easier just because you have an actual stitch to work into. And in the chain one space, you can work a stitch as well. So I'm going to keep working all the way around. Once you get to the front, you're going to be working across the rows again. So now once you get all the way around, we're going to continue working. So let's slip stitch into the first stitch to join here, and yarn over, and we're going to slip stitch into the back loop. You're going to get this nice edge and continue just working yarn over slip stitches through the back loop only. Okay, all the way around. Now once you get all the way around, we're just going to slip stitch to join and fasten this off. Okay, and then you can weave your tail in. But I just want to show you how nice that finished look is for the neck. And at this point, you could leave the little dress as is. Now, my granddaughter that this is for is quite tall for her age, so I definitely want to add a little bit more length to hers, and we could do that by adding a ribbed band to the bottom, or we could add a band that just follows this technique to give it a nice edge detail. For this, I would take a side to join it. Really, you can pick any side, and we'll be working across the side of rows. So it's going to follow that, do 2 stitches per row. So I'm also going to use the smaller hook for this. Put a slip knot on my hook. You can kind of get it into the center. That's great. If not, it's a little tight, so I'm going to move over to the side here. And I will chain 1 just to get that secured. And we do need to fit in 2 yarn over slip stitches across this first cluster. And then 2 in here. Now that's a little bit bulky part of the yarn. I think I'm, just so it doesn't look so chunky at the start, this yarn can tend to go a little bit thick and thin like that. I just want that start to not look as messy. I'm gonna go with the bit thinner. Join this in. Okay, chain 1, yarn over, pulling through the 2 loops on the hook. And then 2 for the next row. Okay, we're going to work this all the way around. Okay, so once you get around, we're going to slip stitch to join. And we're going to repeat just what we did with the neckline. Now, I think I may need to try to stick another stitch in here. So we're going to yarn over slip stitch through the back loops around. And this round will be a little bit easier now that we have our stitches established. Okay, so I've worked a total of 5 rounds. But you can do as many as you want. I'm going to fasten that off. Okay, so now I just need to weave in my tails. You can see how that gives a fun look to the bottom of the dress. Gives it a nice heavy bottom band as well. So now I'm working on the sweater version, and I wanted to show you the alternative band method. Also, I just did a whip stitch on the side seams for this. It does save a little bit of time, and it works up much quicker than doing the mattress stitch, but you could, of course, if you prefer the look of the mattress stitch that pulls it in a little more, you could do it that way as well. But I just whip stitch just to make it quick. So with my smaller hook, I am going to join down here to the seam with a slip stitch, chain 1. And if you want to pull in the waistband a little, which is what I'm going to do for this one, the first row that has the clusters, I'm going to do a single crochet, and then the row that has the larger gap, I'm going to do 2. So 1 in the cluster row, and then 2. And I'm going to work this around. So just single crochets. Now here I'm going to do 1, 1, and then back into my pattern. Okay, so I'm going to complete working this around. So once you get all the way around, I'm going to slip stitch to join. And then we're going to make a chain for the band. So I'm going to go with the same as the cuff, which is 8 stitches. So we're going to chain out 9. Then we're going to do a single crochet in the second chain from the hook and in each chain across. So I like to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll skip that first stitch. This row will account for that. We'll slip stitch into the next 2. And now we'll crochet 2 more rows that account for those slip stitches. So skip the slip stitches, so 1, 2, and then we'll work single crochets to the back loop only. And continue to count so you stay on track. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, chain 1 and turn. And continue working single crochets through the back loop only. And then we'll slip stitch into the next 2, crochet 2 more rows, and repeat this all the way around. Now, if you didn't want the waistband to pull in as much, if you're doing this method for the bottom of the dress, then just make sure to do 2 single crochet per row, and then that will keep it so that it doesn't pull in. So I'm going to continue working this, and I'll show you how to seam that together once I get all the way around. So once you get around with the band, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to slip stitch the band together. Now, We want the right sides together. So I'm just gonna fold it back like this so that I get the right sides together. So our seam goes to the inside. So we'll just come across to the first stitch and go through the first stitch here, and we're going to slip stitch. So go through, over to the other side. So we're going through that starting chain and then over to that last row. And just slip stitch all the way through each stitch. You can just fasten off and weave in that tail. You just want to hide the yarn tail and then make sure to go back in the opposite direction to secure it. And just make sure to finish weaving in any other tails. So here is the finished little sweater. So you can make either the sweater or the dress with the pattern. And this is done with the Prism yarn, and the sweater I worked up in Mellow Spun. They're both a DK weight yarn. Really good substitute, as well as Premier Color Fusion DK. It will give you this look that we have done with the dress, but it's a little bit more of a softer acrylic yarn that isn't the roving style of the Prism. So this is a great option, and I'll be showing how to do the cardigan version in this yarn. Make sure to check the description box for all of the links to the pattern and the supplies. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and tap the bell to stay updated on all my new videos and tutorials. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome day.